Mesdames, Messieurs, Nicolas Rémillard, Marie Dupont se joignent à moi pour vous souhaiter la bienvenue à ce déjeuner d'ouverture de la 30e conférence de Montréal. 30e. Comme le chante Frank Sinatra, That's Life. Hein? Et merci à nos partenaires. Merci à tous ceux qui, pendant ces 30 ans, ont été là pour nous aider, nous permettre de développer la conférence de Montréal. You know, Catherine Clark, she's with us since many years as MC, doing a great job. She's Joe Clark's daughter, the former Prime Minister of Canada, qui a été très présent dans la création et le développement de la conférence de Montréal, comme le Premier ministre Brian Mulroney. Et ensuite, le Premier ministre Jean Chrétien, qui a été exceptionnel pour nous permettre de développer la conférence de Montréal et en faire un outil pour bien comprendre l'économie. Je dois vous dire que nous avons eu ce matin des premières sessions qui nous permettent d'avoir une bonne discussion. And I just want to thank our speakers for having accepted our invitation to join us for this 30th Conference of Montreal. Merci, Monsieur le ministre Éric Girard, d'être avec nous. Nous l'apprécions beaucoup. C'est le déjeuner du gouvernement du Québec. Et nous sommes très fiers de pouvoir travailler avec le gouvernement du Québec. Nous travaillons avec le gouvernement du Canada, nous travaillons avec la ville de Montréal. La mairesse était avec nous hier et nous en sommes très fiers. Pour nous, c'est très important que nous puissions travailler tous ensemble. Nous allons avoir le plaisir à ce déjeuner-causerie d'avoir un moment really special, something really special regarding what's going on in the global economy, what's going on in the world. And we have that question, all of us, we have that question in mind. What's going on? What can happen? And in the second part of this luncheon, we'll have the pleasure to have this interview of Henry Kravis. Henry Kravis by Paul Desmarais. This is a special moment for the Conference of Montreal, and I want to thank Mr. Kravis for having accepted our invitation. Merci. Merci à Paul Desmarais, à Hélène, à Paul III, pour leur appui, leur soutien pendant toutes ces années. Nous avons créé cette conférence il y a 30 ans avec Paul Desmarais Senior. Et voilà, 30 ans plus tard, nous sommes tous ensemble pour nous développer et nous permettre d'apporter notre contribution to, well, the right understanding of what's going on in the world. It's not an easy task to have what's going on there, what we have to do for tomorrow. Alors, mesdames et messieurs, merci d'être avec nous. Nous allons accueillir plus de 3000 personnes dans ces 3 jours, plus de 160 conférenciers. Merci et au plaisir de vous revoir dans ces prochains jours. Merci.
Alors, bonjour à tous et en mon nom et au nom du gouvernement du Québec, bienvenue à Montréal. Et d'entrée de jeu, j'aimerais souligner le 30e anniversaire de la conférence et remercier tous ceux qui sont impliqués, le rayonnement de Montréal, du Québec, du Canada est grandement rehaussé par votre travail et souvent le travail qu'on fait n'est pas récompensé à court terme, mais certainement une des qualités du travail bien fait peut être mesurée par la durée. Et je pense qu'on ne doit pas sous-estimer ce que c'est que de réaliser une conférence de grande qualité pour 30 ans. On m'a demandé hier soir dans un groupe plus restreint et aujourd'hui de vous parler du leadership dans un monde en accélération et comment nous pouvions saisir les opportunités ici au Québec dans un monde en changement. D'abord, il faut se rappeler le contexte. Le contexte dans lequel nous vivons, c'est évidemment le contexte post-pandémique. So we had a pandemic, which created the worst recession since the Second World War. And then we had a global recovery. But this global recovery was it was synchronized. Everybody was growing at the same time, but it was only on 60% of the economy. Parce que les services étaient restreints par la pandémie. Et donc, toute la demande était concentrée sur les biens. And so, when you have excess demand on only 60% of the economy, you have inflation. And so, inflation surprised us in 2022 very much. L'inflation a atteint 8% au Québec en 2022. Et ensuite, on a eu les hausses de taux d'intérêt. Et la politique monétaire fonctionne. Elle a ralenti l'économie, elle a comprimé les dépenses discrétionnaires, elle a rendu les fonds de roulement des entreprises extrêmement dispendieux, les taux de carte de crédit, les prêts auto. Et c'est ce contexte-là, extrêmement difficile pour les citoyens, qui amène ce qu'on voit dans le monde aujourd'hui, c'est-à-dire les résultats des élections européennes hier, une insatisfaction générale des citoyens dans le monde. Partout dans le monde, les gouvernements sont impopulaires parce que partout dans le monde, avec des taux d'intérêt élevés et une économie qui ralentit, c'est difficile. Et la réponse de notre gouvernement, et je sens personnellement une soif des citoyens pour des gouvernements compétents, professionnels, non partisans, qui répondent à ces difficultés. Et la réponse de notre gouvernement a été de protéger le pouvoir d'achat des Québécois. Et c'est pourquoi aujourd'hui, lorsqu'on regarde l'évolution du pouvoir d'achat qu'on mesure par le revenu disponible réel, Real Disposable Net Income Growth, since 2018, Quebec has been the province that has protected its taxpayer, its citizen, the best in Canada. Alors, 117%, le revenu réel disponible depuis 2018 est en hausse de 17%. C'est 13% pour le reste du Canada. Mais bien sûr, il faut faire attention à ces moyennes, parce qu'une moyenne, il y a une distribution autour de ça, et il y a des gens qui souffrent vraiment. Le gouvernement du Québec a des objectifs extrêmement ambitieux pour le Québec. Nous voulons maximiser le potentiel économique du Québec. Nous voulons amener le Québec à un autre niveau. Et avant de faire ça, nous avons dû poser un diagnostic en 2021. Nous avons consulté les experts du secteur privé, du monde académique. En 2021, nous avons présenté un diagnostic. En 2023, nous avons fait une deuxième ronde de consultation qui a amené des solutions et c'est ce dont je voudrais vous parler aujourd'hui. Pour nos invités, pour les gens qui sont ici, vous savez ce que je vais dire, mais if we were to summarize Quebec in two numbers, Quebec is 22% of the population of Canada, but only 20% of its economy. And as long as we've had economic statistics, this gap has existed. So it cannot be attributed to one particular event. Et c'est pour ça que nous avons l'ambition d'amener le Québec à un autre niveau et bien sûr d'éliminer l'écart de richesse avec le reste du Canada et avec bien sûr l'Ontario. Pourquoi l'Ontario ou le reste du Canada? Parce que l'Ontario a la même situation géographique que le Québec, une économie diversifiée, une base industrielle, l'accès au marché américain. Alors, lorsqu'on regarde les statistiques, le PIB par habitant du Québec au cours des 10 dernières années a cru approximativement de 1% par année. Pour éliminer l'écart de richesse avec le reste du Canada, il faudra atteindre 1,5%. Et ça, aujourd'hui, si vous preniez votre téléphone, autrefois une calculatrice, et vous verriez la différence entre croître à 1,5% versus 1% sur une base de 25 ans. La richesse qui est créée par ce simple différentiel, c'est immense. Et c'est pour ça qu'on doit travailler sur le long terme et prendre des bonnes décisions. Et pour pousser le potentiel économique du Québec de 1% mesuré par le PIB par habitant de 1% à 1,5%, 80% de l'effort va devoir venir de la productivité. Alors, vous entendez, vous ne pouvez pas ouvrir le Globe and Mail ou la radio, vous entendez parler du déficit de productivité du Canada. Alors, c'est extrêmement important, mais il faut regarder derrière les statistiques et c'est certain que on dit aux entreprises, vous devez être plus productif, vous devez investir, vous devez innover. Mais le secteur public est très important au Canada, surtout si on somme les dépenses municipales, fédérales, provinciales. Et donc, le secteur public aussi a une responsabilité d'être plus productif. Donc, c'est un défi pour l'ensemble de la société. Maintenant, il ne faut pas non plus sous-estimer l'autre 20%. Parce que bien qu'on dit que 80% va venir de la productivité, c'est la combinaison de la productivité et des travailleurs qui va donner ce qu'on veut produire. Et donc, l'éducation, la recherche de talent, la formation continue de la main-d'œuvre, le 20% qui correspond à l'effort de travail, l'intensité du travail, est extrêmement important. Alors, au Québec, on a des avantages indéniables. En fait, il fait extrêmement bon vivre au Québec. On est très chanceux de vivre ici. Lorsqu'on voyage en Europe, on constate que la guerre est beaucoup plus proche. La qualité de vie, le fait qu'on puisse envoyer nos enfants à pied à l'école, d'avoir un système d'éducation publique de qualité, ce sont tous des avantages extrêmement importants du Québec. Vous devez savoir que nous avons le taux d'emploi des adultes de 15 à 65 ans le plus élevé au Canada. Pourquoi? Parce que nous avons le taux de participation des femmes le plus élevé du Canada. Quebec has the highest participation rate of women in the labor force in Canada. And that is because of good public policy, which is public daycare, which was instituted many years ago in Quebec, and we've seen last year the government of Canada bringing this initiative all over Canada. Bien sûr, nous avons une énergie propre, l'hydraulicité, l'hydroélectricité, et nous avons des défis immenses. Nous devrons doubler notre production d'ici 2050 pour décarboner l'économie. Nous avons des institutions de grande qualité et un des rôles des politiciens is the stewardship. We need to take care, improve our institutions. Par exemple, la Caisse de dépôt, qui est indépendante, qui est un des investisseurs les plus importants au monde. Investissement Québec, qui est le bras du gouvernement qui aide à attirer les investissements étrangers et nos entreprises à grandir, mais aussi nos institutions parlementaires et démocratiques doivent être protégées. La géographie, l'accès à des accords de libre-échange avec plus de 1,5 milliard de citoyens, c'est extrêmement important. Quels sont nos défis? Quels sont nos défis les plus importants? Alors, je suis toujours dans le diagnostic et tout ça est le fruit de consultations d'experts. D'abord, le gouvernement du Québec a une responsabilité extrêmement importante de promouvoir et protéger la culture française en Amérique. Et donc, nécessairement, il y a une réglementation qui est associée à la protection de la langue française. Alors, si on a plus de réglementation associée à la protection de la langue et la culture, nécessairement, on doit avoir un équilibre et un peu moins de réglementation dans tous les autres secteurs de l'économie pour avoir un environnement compétitif. Un sujet qui est très peu discuté aussi, c'est les fameux taux de graduation au secondaire. Parce que lorsqu'on consulte les experts, ils nous disent toutes la même chose. Si tous les gouvernements ne devaient faire qu'une seule chose, ce serait d'investir dans l'éducation publique et de le faire le plus tôt possible. Parce que si vous investissez dans un enfant de 4 ans, vous aurez 80 années de rendement. Si vous investissez dans un jeune adulte de 24 ans, vous aurez 60% de rendement. Et qu'est-ce qu'on observe au Québec? On observe malheureusement que le taux de graduation des garçons au secondaire est 10% inférieur à celui des filles. The graduation rate of young boys is 10% lower than the graduation rate of young girls. And therefore, this is a challenge for all of us. J'ai parlé de la productivité dans le secteur public. J'ai parlé de la transition climatique. Peut-être un mot sur les dépenses fiscales. Dans le débat autour de la productivité du secteur public, un des éléments qui n'est pas suffisamment discuté, c'est que face à la pandémie, les gouvernements ont dû, et M. Morneau est ici aujourd'hui, et je souligne l'excellente collaboration que nous avons eue durant la pandémie, le gouvernement fédéral et le gouvernement du Québec, pour aider nos citoyens et nos entreprises. Mais nous avons poussé le niveau des dépenses fédérales à un niveau extrêmement élevé parce qu'il y avait urgence. Le défi maintenant, c'est que derrière nous sont des taux de croissance de dépenses de l'ordre de 6 à 7%. Devant nous sont des taux de croissance de dépenses fiscales de l'ordre de 3%. Et donc, in the current context, fiscal policy is crowding out private investment because public spending is too high and we need to adapt. Alors, j'ai parlé de ce qu'on nous suggère comme solution. On nous dit, concentrez-vous sur l'éducation, optimisez la productivité du secteur public notamment en santé, puisque c'est 43% de nos dépenses, la numérisation de la santé, tous les efforts qu'on fait au niveau de la gouvernance, les données probantes. Vous ne pouvez pas prendre des bonnes décisions de politique publique sans des bonnes données, des bonnes informations, et je fais énormément de travail avec l'Institut de la statistique du Québec pour que les données administratives du gouvernement soient disponibles pour nos chercheurs. Nous devons favoriser un environnement d'affaires réglementaire et concurrentiel. Et bien sûr, la politique industrielle du Québec repose sur de nombreux secteurs stratégiques, l'aérospatial, l'aluminium, l'intelligence artificielle, le secteur batterie et les sciences de la vie. Une des choses qu'on fait, c'est dans nos zones d'innovation, nous voulons partager des infrastructures de recherche et d'innovation entre les différentes entreprises du secteur privé et le secteur académique. C'est un peu le modèle américain des labs industriels sans les dépenses de défense qui sont si importantes aux États-Unis. Alors, j'aimerais conclure sur une note positive. Les défis sont nombreux. Les avantages du Québec sont indéniables. En dépit de tous les progrès technologiques et des discussions sur l'intelligence artificielle, le talent, le rôle des individus est extrêmement important. Et comme gouvernement, notre vecteur d'intervention, c'est l'éducation publique. Votre gouvernement croit à la gestion rigoureuse des finances publiques et, bien sûr, nous devons faire notre part pour améliorer la productivité du Canada, du Québec, et ça se fait avec l'amélioration des services publics en santé et en éducation. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Bonjour à tous et félicitations à la Conférence de Montréal pour son 30e anniversaire. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I want to thank Power Corporation and the Conference of Montreal for inviting us to partner on this event. I also want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. My name is Julie Caron, Senior Vice President at Franklin Templeton Investments, where we manage nearly $1.5 trillion in assets around the globe. We offer world-class investment solutions across the entire investment spectrum. We're proud to sponsor today's program, which features an incredibly timely conversation on the theme of seizing opportunities in a changing world. To dive deeper into this, we're lucky to have two highly accomplished investment professionals joining us for their insights. Mr. Henry Kravis is co-founder and co-executive chairman of KKR, a leading global investment firm. Prior to his current position, he was co-chief executive officer until 2021. He's actively involved in managing the firm and serves on the private equity investment committees. He'll be interviewed by Mr. Paul Desmarais Jr., chairman of Power Corporation of Canada for the last 28 years. Mr. Desmarais also served as co-CEO of Power Corporation and has previously assumed various positions since joining the company in 1981. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Alors, merci beaucoup. Félicitations à la famille Rémillard pour sa 30e anniversaire et bonjour à tous et à toutes. Alors, spécialement, Henry, bienvenue à la Conférence de Montréal pour sa 30e anniversaire. You'll be grateful that I'm going to continue now in English and want you to thank you for accepting this invitation, Henry, and doing this interview. Really appreciate it. Henry, of course, you've had a fascinating and highly successful career, to say the least, both, though, as an investor and an owner. And I found out today his market cap passed the 100 billion mark. Now that's worth a round of applause. That's really something.
Thank you.
But your approach, Henry, has been marked, I admire you so much, by boldness, daring, and innovativeness. You are called by many the pioneer of the leveraged buyout, of course, and countless books have been written on KKR and many of his deals. Now, you started at Bear Stearns, but eventually, of course, you outgrew that setting. And in order to try to do things, of course, your own way turned out to work out pretty well. But I'd like to start back in the 1970s. when you really, what is it that gave you the conviction to do the big leap out of Bear Stearns? After all, you'd have probably been a partner there in no time. And what can we learn from making big bets?
Well, first of all, Paul, thank you for inviting me to join all of you, and I appreciate this incredible turnout to listen to us. Paul, I think back, and it seems like yesterday that we started KKR. There was 1976. Jerry Kohlberg, George Roberts, and I were all three of us partners at the firm, part of the partnership. And you have to understand that at Bear Stearns, it was very much a sales and trading firm. For them, overnight was long term. For us, we wanted to have a business that we'd make investments for a minimum 5 to 10 years. So, number one. Number two, we wanted to have a business where we could set our own culture. We wanted a culture where everybody at the firm participated in absolutely everything we did, whether you worked on a transaction or you didn't work on a transaction. And the reason for that, we wanted a team approach where we could call on anybody at the firm who had some expertise, and they would quickly join the team on an individual investment. There was no, you didn't run around and say, I did this and I did that. We hated that. That's what Bear Stearns very much was. And literally it was so bad that I found I would lock my desk drawer at night because I found people would rummage around to see what we were working on. So the most important thing, and we started making investments, what is now known as private equity, and there was nobody doing it when we did it. It started in the late 1960s. Bear Stearns never put a penny into any deal we did. And so we wanted to be able to go off and set a culture the way we wanted it, which we think is probably the most important thing in any company, the culture you set. And I look back today, and without a doubt, the fact that we have this inclusive culture where everybody participates, even though today we have 25 offices around the world, we 45 different products, exactly the same culture that we started with there. So the reason we did this is we wanted to chart our own destiny and try it. We literally started the firm with $120,000. George and I, first cousins, both 32 years old at the time, had no money, really, even though we were part of the partnership, because you had to leave everything in, put it back in. So we put up $10,000 each, and Jerry Kohlberg was 19 years older, and he put up $100,000. And that's how we started the firm. And we literally could not raise a fund on terms that made sense to us of $25 million. And today we have about $580 billion of assets under management. And you just put one foot in front of the other and you be true to your word. And we have a saying at the firm, and this was important when we began, and it's important even more so today. People do business with people that they like and trust. Absolutely. It's about as simple as that.
Absolutely. Well, you know, one of the big decisions I guess any owner has to make is the naming of a CEO. And you just did that in 2021. So I was sort of wondering if you'd give us a sense of what you look for the next generation of leader now as you leap forward. What would you looking for when you're naming?
Well, thank you for asking the question. And the reason I say thank you, because after 45 years of being co-CEO with George Roberts, my first cousin, we got a promotion. And so I'm really happy about that. Moved up to executive chair with George. And you have to understand that Joe Bay and Scott Nuttall, who are two co-CEOs now, have been with the firm at that point about 25 years when we named them. We named them first co-chief operating officers in 2017, and they did that for 4.5 years and did a fantastic job. Now, what were we looking for? We wanted somebody that are two people that, one, got along very well, and just like George and I did. Too many firms decide, well, they're going to stick two people together and they're going to be co-heads, and they never should have done it. So Joe and Scott have been closest friends from the day they came in. They came in the same class. They worked together. We We're looking for people that believed in our culture. Because if they didn't believe in the culture of the firm and didn't live by it every day, it wouldn't work. What are we looking for? We're looking for people that are innovative, willing to take risk. We're in the risk business. That's what we do. And but sensible risk. And so it's very important that each person that we elevate up, that they understand what risk is, they understand how to innovate, because innovation and our culture really go hand in hand. That's the DNA of what the firm is. We always like to try something new, never been done, and see how that works.
Let's go to another event that's been quite risky and changed in the world a lot, for you at least, is the growth of competitors. Private equities is just spawned all over the world. Hedge funds now, too, are much bigger than they were even 20 years ago. And, of course, the rise of activist shoulders. So there's been a lot of crowding in your space. And I'm wondering, how have you adapted to this different crowding space, and how do you think about it?
Well, you know, I like to say there's a wonderful quote by General Shinseki, who used to be Chief of Staff of the Army in the U.S., and he said, if you don't like change, you're going to like obsolescence a lot less. So that's how we've always thought. We've thought, be innovative, stay ahead of the curve, create new product. And that's how we moved from a single product for many years, from 1976 literally until 2004. It was private equity. In 99, we moved the private equity business to expand into Europe. And in 05, we expanded into Asia. When you go to these markets, scale is really important, and we've been able to scale there. We got into the credit business in 04 because we found we go see a company and they didn't want to take their company private, or they didn't need equity capital, but they needed someone to refinance their debt, and that wasn't our business. So we said, well, we better get in the business because there's an opportunity there. Because half the battle was just getting in to see an executive, and we were missing the opportunities. So we created capital in order to do that. Next, I would say that we decided to get into the infrastructure business. And today, our fastest growing business is our infrastructure business. We went from the first fund, which was the hardest fund to raise, even though we've been investing in power generation, power transmission, integrated utilities, pipelines, etc. Took us over a year to raise $1 billion. And then we went $1 billion, $4 billion, $7.5 billion, and $17.5 billion for the next fund. That's a very fast growing. There is not a country in the world today that doesn't need capital for infrastructure. And whether it's for climate, as they're talking about, these nice ladies that came to see us, or other forms, whether it be on logistics, whatever it is, fiber to the home today, it's very important. So we've expanded in that area dramatically. All in all, we tell everyone, if you invest with KKR, you get the whole firm. You're not just investing in one fund and you're number 64 in a fund. We look at everybody that invests with us to become a real partner with the firm and get the whole firm. A mistake we had made, and God knows we made plenty of mistakes over the years, but one mistake we made was not thinking enough about the macro side when you're looking at an investment. We would look at the company itself, and I'll call that the micro side, and forget about what the environment, the economy, etc., would play on that, what regulation might play. And so we now have a whole ESG team at KKR. We have a whole team that focuses on macro and asset allocation. That's how we have been able to stay ahead. And then we have a group called KKR Capstone. It's 100 people who focus on operations in companies. Once we make an investment, we'll bring them in. These are people, many of them come from industry, some from the consulting world, and they'll work together with us. So you've got to come at it from every which way, try different things, and not everything's going to work, but be willing to understand that you may have to shut an idea down and try it a different way.
Well, you know, that's really interesting, Henry, because it brings me, in a sense, to the present time that we're in and everything you're talking about in terms of sketching the backdrop. you know, you and I, basically our whole generation, never really dealt with geopolitical risk on the scale that we are today. With the war in Ukraine, that's really destabilizing not only part of Europe, but our whole NATO alliance as well, potentially. There's, of course, a Middle East war, then there's many wars in Sudan and other places in Africa. Then, of course, there's a whole China-U.S. tension with a restriction on certain goods and things of that nature. And these are all situations, as you're saying, you know, they define the macro. They're defining the supply chains, the inflation, the higher interest rates that have been caused by some of these issues. So the global economy, as you say, is so important. And I know you have General Petraeus, who I've seen now twice present, unbelievably interesting. You might talk a little about that, who analyzes world developments with you. But I'm sort of wondering, what do you see as a role for business to shape and impact this world around us? These ladies are saying, hey, how do you shape the world, and how do you do it? How can you help with some of these issues? So how do you approach that? And talk to us a little bit. I'd be fascinated how you're working on these world events and how you follow them.
Well, that's a huge question, obviously, there. And you're right. I brought in General Petraeus about 12 years ago to KKR because I had an idea for us to set up a global institute to focus on public policy. And when you're dealing with investments all over the world, if you had asked me, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, do you think you'll ever invest in Vietnam, Ethiopia, Serbia, and go down a list like that? I would have said absolutely not. The fact of the matter is today, you have to, if you're going to be in a global business, you have to be prepared to invest anywhere in the world. Some will work out, some won't. And so I brought him in to set up what we call the KKR Global Institute, which focuses on political situations, on regulation in various countries, dealing with governments, what is it like, and so forth. So you must bring all of that in. The question could have been shaped a little differently, in which you say, do you think that markets will continue to go up with all of this uncertainty out there? Yes, I do think so, because people are looking for returns, and we haven't seen any downturn of anything. Markets have continued up in spite of inflation, in spite of the threats that are out there. Think about what is the first thing, and it's unfortunate in a way, but I get it, that people vote on. In America, they vote with their pocketbook. How am I doing? Is my family able to afford the life that we want? And assuming that you can, they feel good. And they don't really focus on foreign policy and foreign issues that much. It's probably the same here as it is in most countries. When you talk about foreign policy, it's down the list there. We take it into account. You have to risk adjust returns. And too many people think, oh, you just make an investment no matter what. You can't. You have to decide, okay, what kind of return should we get given the risk that we're taking. Now, for example, in China, we have about 19 investments in China. All of them are focused on the rising middle class. And we're staying away from the government. We started, for example, it became a very large dairy business, because when China had the Mengdu, had the melamine scare, a problem they had on tainted milk, we went to Mengdu Dairy, Chinese dairy company, and said, we will bring state-of-the-art dairy techniques and capital from the U.S. and from New Zealand, and we set up a dairy business. We ended up with 200,000 cows when we finished. We had a lot of cows, more than you have.
Yes, you're right about that.
And so we set up a series of these, and then Mengdu ended up buying it. We always lose track of, we're dealing with 1.4 billion people in China. It's hard to think the size of the country. And so we're finding areas, for example, they had the tainted pork. So we went to a pork manufacturer, said, we'll provide capital and we'll bring some know-how to make sure you don't have tainted pork going forward, which is a very big part of the Chinese diet, as you well know. So these are things that you do. You try to fit in areas and stay away and don't poke them in the nose. That's the worst thing you can do. And say, okay, are we investing in areas where there's a need?
Well, that's good. I'd like to juxtapose now. I'm sure a lot of the people in the room are thinking, gee, you know, we're all facing risks, the more risks, we're nervous about it. And this whole culture thing is important too, as you say. So how do you take the resilience and superimpose the kind of culture that you're trying to build to have resilience, to be able to adapt to these risks, which are more volatility too? I mean, some of them are bigger and they move. So how did you approach that? Did it evolve over time? And how did you manage that? And I guess your CEO is managing that today, but it started really with yourself. You've lived through a lot of risky moments. 2009, we talked about the pandemic, but 2009 wasn't exactly a breeze in the park either. And there were many others. So
first of all, I'd like to have just $1, and I'll take a Canadian dollar for this, of how many times I've read an article which says private equity is dead. And they say it always when interest rates go up or there's turmoil in the world. I love turmoil. Turmoil to us is when you should be leaning in. Everybody is looking at their shoes and saying, oh, woe, poor us, the world's coming to an end. The world will not come to an end. Yes, there are going to be ups and there are going to be downs. When we started the business in 76, the first thing we had to face in 78 to 81 period, 82 period, was inflation. Inflation hit a high of just under 14% at that time, and we had a prime rate in the U.S. of over 20%. We focused on this will come down at some point. Let's be ready. Let's pick the targets we want to work with going forward. And we made our best investments in 1982 because we were ready. Fast forward to our global financial crisis. Global financial crisis hit, and we told everyone at the firm, because none of us had ever seen anything like this bad. And we said to everybody, focus on what you can control. There's going to be a lot of noise in the system, and there's not much you can do about that. But you can make a difference in the companies you're responsible for. Get the debt down as fast as you can. Get ready to refinance when we come out of this, because rates are going to be lower, and take advantage of that at the time. And so I like to lean in. So, example, about 2 years after our global financial crisis in the U.S., you had a global financial crisis in Europe. And everyone was saying, Paul, that Italy, Portugal, Spain, Greece, and Ireland were going in the ocean. They were going to disappear. They were going to be gone, and I didn't believe it. So I spent quite a bit of time in Spain. I met with everybody from Prime Minister Rajoy throughout the cabinet, corporate heads, and others. And I found the one guy that was very important in this whole thing, who I was looking for. Did they have somebody that would follow our game plan in the U.S. of setting up good bank, bad bank? If you set up a good bank, bad bank, you can then have the ability to raise outside capital, because you take the bad assets out of the bank, and then you have a good bank that can continue to grow, but it needs capital. So we made the decision, let's focus on Spain, put a lot of capital in, and we sort of said to each other, let's back up the dump truck and put as much money in. And everybody else was saying Spain's going to be gone. You have to be patient. You need patient capital, but you have to be able to look ahead. You know, you've got one of the greatest hockey players ever, Wayne Gretzky. And people would ask Wayne, well, why is it that you're so good and better than anybody else? He said, well, I would anticipate where the puck was going. We do the same thing. That's sort of how we think. Where's the world going? Where can we take advantage of dislocations in the market? And that's what we want. We're not stock pickers. I don't know anything about picking stocks. I have not bought a stock in 48 years since we've had the firm. None of us at KKR do, because we never wanted to have a conflict. And so I don't know anything about market timing. I only think about if we make an investment in a company, that's just the beginning. What can we do to make that company a better business and grow it over the long term? And if we can do that and have a vision of what we can do, we can make a huge difference, regardless of what the overall outside influence might be.
Wow, that's great advice, I think, for this room, Henry, or for anybody, as you say, to look forward and have that positive attitude going and picking your spots as well. Although we're running out of time, so I'd like to do two things. One of them is, I've always admired you so much for your energy level and your positive attitude. Give us some advice on how do you keep an energy? I mean, you were telling me you've been to Europe 6 times in the last month or something.
Four times in 6.5 weeks.
So imagine 4 times out 6 weeks. You're traveling all the time, and your curiosity. You talked about that earlier. What? Tell us, just on a more personal note, what keeps you young? What keeps you running with this energy level? I love that about you.
My wife, Mary Jose.
Oh, there you go. A girl from Montreal, for those of you who are from outside of Canada, must be the same.
Brian Mulroney used to say to me, he said, Henry, he said, you took our best asset that we had in Canada.
I think I would agree with that. Yeah. There's no doubt.
Look, it's very simple. Picking your parents helps a lot. I try to exercise at least 5 to 6 times a week. And do that. I guess having the right genes is helpful to me. And I'm really curious, as you are, Paul. And I can say to you, I don't think anybody can be a great investor or a great executive unless they're curious. I used to, I wanted to try something at KKR. In New York, our office is in the down at Hudson Yards, and our floors are 74 to 80. And I wanted to take a couple of our young people to the window, and I said, what do you see out there? And I said, they'll think it's a trick question, so they're looking hard, and they'll say, I see that tugboat in the Hudson River. I said, you failed. I want you to see everything. I want you to look out there and see nothing but possibility and to see how things are connected. And so we had a theme one year at the firm, connect the dots. How do you get everything together to pick the right investments and to know where to focus your efforts? And so, I'm hungry. You know, when I go to India, I'm there for 5 or 6 days. I want to see as many people as I can. And I was there last January. I go every year, and I had 41 meetings in 5.5 days. And you can do it in India if they come to you. You can't do it if you have to drive, where traffic's too bad. But, that's what I do. And it's just being curious. And I love meeting young people. Look, your sons are terrific, and I love talking to them. I love what they're doing, that they're out there doing something on their own, and they're doing it really well. I love that.
Well, Henry, you're such a generous man. You've been so generous with my family and my sons. I want to end on this. You're an incredible philanthropist, too, and you're so humble about it. I remember I was bringing my daughter-in-law, who was graduating I go to the Columbia campus, and what do I see? The business school, Henry Kravis. And so I think you never even talked to me about that. I didn't even know it. Of course, I knew you'd graduated there, but I hadn't known that you'd been so generous. But you've been generous all over, and I sort of wonder, how do you approach your philanthropy and your donations? Like what moves you, and how do you think about your giving? Because you do so much.
I had lunch one day with David Rockefeller. I called him and I said, David, would you have lunch with me? And I was in, I guess, my early 40s, and I was starting to make a little money. And I said, the reason I want to have lunch with you, David, and I've asked you here to have lunch, is because I want to understand how you, as one of the greatest philanthropists that I've ever seen, what do you do? And he said to me something that I've always remembered, and it was, I'm not going to tell you where to put your charitable money, but whatever you do, get involved. Roll your sleeves up and get involved. Pick 1 or 2 charities and get involved. So Mary Jose and I have chosen 3 areas that we focus on. One is science and medicine. She chairs Sloan Kettering Research Institute, which is half of what Memorial Sloan Kettering, the great cancer hospital, is. And we've given them quite a bit of money to develop new technology, new ways of finding cancer cures. Education is the second one, and I have chaired a number of educational organizations. I either like to start something or try to improve something myself. So I currently chair something called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, which is taking young students from ninth grade in high school all the way through college, an 8-year program, and they have to be from the underserved community, $35,000 household income, typically first in their family to go to school. And we get about 90% of those kids that start in ninth grade into college, and 93% of them graduate. It's one of the best things that I've ever done. I love doing it.
Well done.
And to me, I get really excited about that. And the third area is the arts. Marie-Josée has been president for 14 years of Museum of Modern Art, and she's now chairman of MoMA. We support it enormously, both in her efforts as the leader of that. And so those three areas is where we focus our, yes, any people who are friends of ours will come and would you buy a table or make a little contribution to this, that, or the other? Of course you're going to do that. But there's a focus. And to us, I get no greater pleasure, nor does Marie-Josée, than helping others that are less fortunate than we are.
You know, that's great. I can imagine how blessed they are to have your enthusiasm, your knowledge, bringing that to the table and helping them all. As you've shared with everyone here, thank you for sharing your ideas this time with us, Henry. Unfortunately, our time is out, but I've really enjoyed it. And as usual, if you're left with just one or two messages, you know, be curious, get out there, and you're a giving person when all is said and done. And you know, to receive, you've got to give. And you're a wonderful, generous person. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy it. You're terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks.